You've got a child or a loved one who has processing issues. And you're probably pretty exhausted, probably pretty frustrated with feeling like nothing that you're doing is working. This is very frustrating. I've experienced it myself with my own children. I've even experienced it as I treat myself because I got processing issues also. I'm going to walk you through something we call the processing approach that can help you work with your loved one even better to help them succeed in life. The processing approach consists of 5 major points. And if you can memorize those 5 major points, you're going to be more successful. There are underpoints in each of them, but just start with memorizing the main 5. And here they are. The first one, way of being. The second one, flexibility and understanding. Third, slow, simple, clear. Fourth is if there's a process, it processes. And fifth, mind the funnel. Now let's dive in and understand what each of those means. The way of being. What does that even mean? Way of being is the state of our heart. How do we think and feel towards another person? Is our heart at peace or is our heart at war? If you want to learn more about that specifically, there are some excellent books by the Arbinger Institute that can help you understand that. The key component to helping your loved one who has processing issues is maintaining a heart at peace. You are going to be frustrated with them. I guarantee it. I've done it myself. If you are frustrated and you're approaching them with any of the other skills that we have, if you're seeing them as an irritant or an object, you will not be effective because they will see that. So maintain that heart of peace. Also, you're going to need to maintain a Teflon demeanor. For those of you out there who don't know what Teflon means, Teflon is that non-stick surface that was on pots years ago before they found out that it was toxic. So a Teflon demeanor is not letting things stick. We talk about the term water off of a duck's back. It's the same kind of concept. Your loved one is going to get overwhelmed at times. They're going to be frustrated and they're going to say and do things that are rude, offensive, that will trigger you. You're going to want to take those things personally. Don't. Think about times that you have been overwhelmed, stressed out, had 100 things to do. How likely are you to act as your best self? Have you ever said something that you didn't mean or you later regretted simply because you were overwhelmed? So have I. Learn to not take it personally. Have a Teflon demeanor. Additionally, keep criticism or feedback in private. When you give feedback in public, you're adding more to their funnel to have to process. They're now worried about what everyone else in that area is thinking about them and the situation, which also means they're less likely to be processing the feedback that you're trying to give them. They're zoned out, they're checked out, they're overwhelmed, and they will probably then lash out. The main principles within flexibility and understanding is the idea that if you are rigid when they are being rigid, it will never equate to them being flexible. I know this personally because I've tried it hundreds of times and it has never worked. If you want someone who is being rigid to become flexible, you have to meet them with flexibility. One of the best ways to do that is seeking to understand. When we take the time to slow down and understand what it is that they're saying, you will do better. I have a video on the talking stick. The talking stick is a really great way to train and create structure for you to understand one another. It slows things down. And an interesting thing happens. When someone feels understood, they're more likely to take the time to understand you. So use the talking stick to help them move beyond rigidity. Another tool is the 80-20 approach. You've probably heard this in business scenarios and all that kind of stuff. This is a little bit different. 80-20 is you are getting 80% of what you want and giving some flexibility to the 20% of what they need. And that need is flexibility in how something is done. You aren't changing the expectation. You may be changing the avenue with which that expectation is done. For example, a rigid parent might say something like, "You need to clean this room right now." For a processing kid, that's going to overwhelm them immediately. So you could say something more like this: "I can see that your room's kind of a big mess." You might even be feeling overwhelmed with that. It does need to get clean before you can go do things with friends. Would you like some help getting started, or do you think you can do it by yourself? Just giving that little option right there, offering a little bit of help to get the momentum going, can help them ease out of their rigidity of, "I'm not doing this, this is stupid." Additionally, it's important to have reasonable expectations. If I were to tell my processing child that they had to do 10 things, and I was telling them all at once, they're going to easily get overwhelmed. If I'm expecting them to understand loads of difficult concepts all at once, that's unreasonable. I might need to break things down. That moves us into the next category, which is slow, simple, clear. I have worked with many parents and even teachers who talk fast. And the speed at which they're talking makes it harder and harder to understand what it is that's being said. When you think about the funnel analogy, if we're pouring water into a funnel, as long as it's going in as fast as it can come out, it's fine. But the moment it's coming in faster than it can go out, it's going to start filling and overflowing. So if you are talking fast, you're putting in high volume into that funnel. It's going to start filling up. They won't understand. So notice, am I talking fast? If you are, slow down. Take a breath. That will help. Additionally, sometimes we over-talk an issue, or we beat around the bush, and that makes things more complex, more difficult to understand. If you can be precise and succinct in what you have to say, it is less for them to have to process. So, if you have a hard time being succinct, stop. Think about what it is that you're trying to say. That's okay. It gives them time to slow down. It gives them time to process. And it gives you a chance to simplify what it is that you're trying to say. Additionally, if you are giving abstract ideas, it's going to be harder to understand because there may be multiple ways to understand that thing. The more concrete and black and white you can make your communication, the easier it is to understand. Or if there's a lot of things that they are trying to understand, break it down. Make it smaller and simpler to understand. For example, if their room is dirty and there's 100 things on the floor, they'll walk in and be totally overwhelmed by how much there is to do. But if you break that down into smaller chunks like, "Hey, why don't you pick up all your dirty clothes and put them in the hamper?" That is a more simple task, and it's very clear. It makes it easier to digest. Yes, I can do that. Once that task is done, then you can give another task. The more you do this by breaking things into smaller chunks, you can start teaching them how to break their own difficulties into smaller chunks that are more manageable to handle. Sometimes what we do when we're frustrated or not paying attention is we talk across the room. It's better to actually have close proximity. Be there with them. If they're okay with touch, sometimes even putting your arm around their shoulder to show that you're on their side can make a difference. If they're not okay with touch, that's not needed. But the idea is maintain eye contact, make sure you're getting the information through, and keep it clear. Help them, be with them. That moves us into the fourth category, which is if there's a process, it processes. The important thing on this one is to understand what that phrase even means. So I want you to think for a moment. Think about your shower routine. Think about kind of the process that you go through from start to finish at the end of the shower, and about how long that takes you. Now, if I asked you to do that shower routine backwards, will you be able to do that as quickly as you would otherwise? No. It's going to take you longer. You're going to be thinking about, okay, what's next? Okay, now what? But over time, you will be able to do it just as quickly. It just takes practice. As soon as there is a process that is consistent, you will do it quicker. There's a really cool principle about learning, and that's repetition makes things go faster. The more times you do something, the easier it is to do the thing. Ralph Waldo Emerson said this: "That which we persist in doing becomes easier. Not that the nature of the task has changed, but that our ability to do has increased." That is the principle of if there is a process, it processes. Our brains are a complex network of neural pathways, neurons interconnected with each other. Every neuron looks somewhat like this. There's the main component of the neuron, and then it has axons branching off of it. And these axons are a really important thing. This is where the electrical message is being passed down from neuron to neuron. On this axon is a fatty tissue called myelin. It's kind of like the coating that you would see on electrical wires in your home. And the thicker the myelin, the faster that the electrical impulse can travel down the axon. So the big question is how do we increase the thickness of that myelin? Repetition. So creating structure in your home, creating routines, and practicing them consistently actually speeds up the processing process. It becomes natural. You don't have to think about walking anymore, but when you were just learning how to walk, you did. The same is true. The more you can create those consistent patterns, routines, and structures, the better that your loved one is going to be able to think through things, because now they have more capacity in their brain to do so. Often it is challenging for someone with processing issues to deal with changes and transitions, something new disrupting their life, or a break from routines. So it is an important thing for you to give more time to be able to process those issues. For example, if you're going to have a dentist appointment that is not in their normal schedule, maybe it's in the middle of their school day, to tell them right in that morning, you're going to get a blow up. But if you tell them a week in advance, saying, hey, just as a reminder, you have a dentist appointment in a week at this time on this day. They're gonna be like, what? Oh, that's stupid, I was in school. I know, that might be a little bit frustrating, but that's when it's gonna be, so just want you to know ahead of time. And then maybe a couple days before, you'll remind them again. And then the day of, you'll also remind them again. That creates something in their brain to process. It's a change in the routine, so you're forecasting the change so that they have the time to process it. Forecasting is an essential principle of if there's a process, it processes. Front-loading is another principle that will be really important. Front-loading is preparing them for their typical emotional responses to things and can be used to help them process through their emotions in a different way. So if I had to bring up a difficult concept or a difficult situation to my child, I might say, hey, I've got something to talk to you about that normally you get kind of upset and overwhelmed with. I'm wondering if, as I talk to you about it today, you can stay a little bit calmer. That automatically plugs into their brain the idea of being calmer and helps them to process their emotions in a different way. The last part of the processing approach is mind the funnel. This is so important because a lot of the tools that we've talked about here don't really work if the funnel is overflowing. It doesn't work. And so if you can see that they are starting to become overwhelmed, the key is stop pouring into the funnel. Give them space. Sometimes we freak out that, no, we have to address it right now. And I would question that. Do we actually have to address it right now? If you could give it 5 minutes of space, saying, okay, I can see that you're overwhelmed. Why don't we take a break right now for 5 minutes and we can come back and talk to you about it? Why don't you work on settling? That will make that conversation significantly more effective than if you just keep pushing. So if you can see they're overwhelmed, don't continue to keep trying to process. Give space. Additionally, be aware of the environment. What are the stimulations that are coming in? Are they overwhelmed with sound, or are there a lot of things going on and they're distracted? If you can be aware of all those are things that are information coming into the funnel. If you want what you have to say to matter and to sink in, manage the stimulating environment. So the better you get at recognizing the signs and catching it early, the better things will go. Now, when you plug all those 5 things together, you're going to be more effective in working with your loved one. That doesn't mean that it's going to be perfect, that you're not going to have challenges come up. Challenges are a part of life. Accept them. Maintain a proper way of being. Learn these principles. It will go better. It won't go perfect. I hope that helps.